The question hit him the moment he stepped onto the rooftop of a Manhattan penthouse, watching a private helicopter rise into the fog like a ghost disappearing into the clouds. How much money does someone actually need to be considered rich in America? Because here, above the noise of ordinary life, the rules of wealth felt different, almost rewritten. What seemed extravagant to most people was simply Tuesday to the men and women who lived behind tinted glass and biometric locks. It wasn't the view that startled him, it was the realization that every floor beneath his feet represented another level of financial reality. Another definition of rich, each one changing depending on which zip code, tax bracket, or lifestyle you were brave enough to imagine. And as he watched that helicopter vanish into the gray sky, he understood one thing with absolute clarity. In America, wealth is not just a number, it is a threshold, an identity. A constantly shifting target that reveals who controls comfort, who commands power, and who lives in a world untouched by the storms the rest of the country feels every day. And as that thought lingered in the cold morning air, this unsettling question of what rich truly means in a country where the ground shifts. Under every financial footprint, you realize this journey is only beginning a path filled with hidden thresholds, statistical illusions, and uncomfortable truths the wealthy rarely speak aloud. And before we step deeper into this world where money shapes reality like gravity, if you love Millionaire Wisdom decoded with this kind of depth and cinematic clarity, hit subscribe so you never miss the next classified insight. And give this video a like and share it with someone who's always wondered where the line between ordinary wealth and American riches is truly drawn. Because what comes next will challenge everything you think you know about money. When you try to understand what it truly means to be rich in America, the first thing you realize is that the definition is not fixed, stretches, bends, and reshapes itself based on geography, culture, psychology, and the invisible forces of economic evolution. And nowhere is this more visible than in the neighborhoods where wealth expresses itself not through numbers on a screen, but through the air people breathe, the choices they make, and the worlds they inhabit. To someone standing in rural Mississippi, earning $150,000 a year might feel like crossing the border into abundance. Like stepping into a future where bills don't suffocate you and every emergency isn't a threat. But travel just a few hours to Miami's Brickell or stand on the sun-soaked sidewalk outside a Los Angeles Whole Foods. Or walk past the rows of strollers in Brooklyn's Park Slope and suddenly $150,000 feels like survival, not luxury. This is the quiet paradox of American wealth. The richer the location, the poorer your money feels. And so, the idea of being rich becomes a moving target, a mirage that shifts depending on the horizon you're chasing. For some, being rich means stability, having enough cash to feel insulated from life's random disasters. For others, it means comfort, being able to choose what you eat, where you live, how you spend your hours. For a smaller group, it means status, having access to circles, memberships, experiences that elevate your identity beyond the ordinary. And for the smallest group of all, true wealth means freedom, the ability to structure life solely on desire, not obligation. But here's the uncomfortable truth. These layers of wealth are not evenly distributed, and the jump from one layer to the next is often far larger than people imagine. Today, the median American household income hovers around a range that barely covers rising rents, groceries, medical bills, and unpredictable crises. So when people ask, "How much do you need to be rich in America?" they're not really asking about money, they're asking about escape. Escape from stress. Escape from instability. Escape from the fear of becoming financially erased by a single unlucky moment. And this is where the first cracks of reality appear. To be rich in America, in the simplest, most grounded sense, means earning enough that these fears no longer govern your decisions, and that number is far higher than most people have been told. But the story becomes even more complex when you look beyond the surface, into the cities that shape the world's perception of American success. In San Francisco, where startup mythology makes millionaires look middle class, The cost of being rich can easily climb past $400,000 a year. Not because of extravagant lifestyles, but because basic stability demands it. In Manhattan, simply existing comfortably, let alone living richly, can require more than what most Americans would consider a massive salary. And in Los Angeles, where sunlight masks the quiet pressure to display wealth, the definition of rich dissolves into expectations. Private school tuition, Tesla chargers in garages, meal prep delivery not as luxury but as necessity, skincare routines costing more per month than some people spend on groceries. But beneath all this surface-level noise lies something deeper: the psychological threshold of wealth. Most people think about money in comparison to those around them. Your income becomes a mirror reflecting the lives of your neighbors, coworkers, friends, and influencers you follow online. And suddenly, being rich isn't about meeting a specific number. It's about feeling like you've outrun your environment's expectations. This creates a strange distortion. Someone earning $450,000 a year in Silicon Valley may feel financially trapped, while someone earning $120,000 in suburban Ohio might feel untouchably wealthy. But this geographic inflation of expectations doesn't change the core truth hidden inside the American financial system. To be truly rich, in a way that transcends zip codes, opinions, and economic fluctuations, you must reach a level of stability where your life becomes controlled by choice, not pressure. And that level, historically, used to be reachable for the upper middle class. But today, because of inflation, stagnating wages, and the rising cost of essentials, the line has moved dramatically. In fact, one of the most shocking realities is that millions of Americans earning high incomes feel poor because they never cross the boundary into financial safety. A boundary not created by luxury desires, but by unavoidable expenses. That's why the first chapter of Understanding Wealth in America requires peeling back the psychological layers that confuse people. Being rich is not just about earning more. It's about how much of that money you keep, how much security it provides, and how far it stretches compared to your surroundings. It's also about the silent advantages the wealthy benefit from: generational wealth cushions, financial literacy, tax strategies, social networks, and the stability that compounds over time. A wealthy person doesn't just have money, they have options, buffers, and leverage. They can make mistakes without collapsing. They can change cities, careers, or lifestyles without fearing financial ruin. They can take risks others cannot. They can buy time, the most expensive luxury in the modern world. And so, when people ask how much money someone needs to be rich in America, they are really asking how much it costs to buy peace, time, health, and agency. How much it costs to build a life where decisions are made from a place of abundance, not scarcity. And the answer, as you'll soon discover, isn't one single number, but a series of thresholds, levels of wealth that mark the difference between comfort, stability, privilege, and true financial freedom. Because being rich in America isn't about reaching a finish line, it's about crossing the invisible borders that separate one life from another, and understanding how those borders were built in the first place. And this journey into the anatomy of American wealth begins here, with the realization that the concept of rich cannot be defined until we understand the forces that shape it: geography, lifestyle, psychology, inflation, and the silent architecture of inequality woven into the fabric of the country. But now that the foundation is clear, we can step deeper into the next layer, where numbers start to reveal the truth. And the truth, as you're about to see, is far more surprising than the myths that dominate conversations about money. Understanding the true cost of being rich in America requires going beyond the emotional and psychological thresholds we uncovered earlier and stepping into the hard data, the lived realities, and the complicated financial architecture that silently governs the lives of every income bracket. Because once you move past the illusions of lifestyle inflation and the noise of social comparison, you begin to see something far more structural. The United States is a country with multiple financial universes operating simultaneously. each with its own rules, expectations, and price of entry. At the bottom, surviving requires an income that hasn't kept pace with rising costs of housing, healthcare, childcare, education, and transportation. In the middle, maintaining stability demands a constant battle to avoid slipping backward. And at the top, true wealth is defined not merely by income, but by assets that generate more income effortlessly. And so, the question, how much money do you need to be rich in America, becomes almost impossible to answer until you understand how wildly different these universes are. Consider the middle class, once the backbone of American society, now stretched thin under the pressure of expenses that have doubled or tripled while wages barely budged. For decades, the dream was simple: earn a stable salary, buy a house, raise a family, save for retirement, and build a modest but comfortable life. But today, that dream is no longer guaranteed, because people work less, but because the system evolved faster than incomes could follow. Childcare in many cities rivals rent. Medical bills can destroy savings overnight. College tuition has skyrocketed to levels unimaginable a generation ago. And as these costs rise, the definition of rich drifts higher too, creating a psychological compression where even high earners feel financially fragile. This fragility is most pronounced in America's wealthiest urban centers, New York, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Boston, Seattle, where six-figure incomes behave like middle-class paychecks once did. A family earning $350,000 a year in Manhattan might seem unquestionably wealthy to the rest of the country. Yet between taxes, rent or mortgage, childcare, transportation, student loans, and simple daily living, their savings rate may be dangerously close to zero. And this is the paradox. High income does not guarantee wealth, while low expenses can create it. Which is why wealth researchers differentiate between high earners and the truly rich. High earners work for money. The rich make money work for them. High earners can be one emergency away from financial stress. The rich can survive years of economic downturn without fear. High earners may live well, but often cannot stop working. The rich have freedom measured in decades, not days. And so the next layer of understanding the cost of being rich in America is recognizing the difference between income, rich, and asset. And asset, etch. Many Americans cross the boundary into high-income territory. They become doctors, lawyers, tech workers, consultants, entrepreneurs, but never cross into wealth because they never accumulate assets that grow without their labor. In other words, they make money, but their money never multiplies on its own. And this is where the real definition of rich begins to take shape. The wealthy don't measure richness by income, they measure it by financial independence. Not how much do I earn, but how long can I live without working. This is the invisible line that separates comfort from true wealth. In financial terms, being rich means having enough assets, real estate, businesses, investments, to cover your lifestyle indefinitely without relying on active income. And the cost of reaching that point is far higher than most Americans realize. If someone wants to live a modestly rich life, traveling occasionally, owning a comfortable home, driving a decent car, raising children without stress, they may need assets generating at least $200,000 a year, which means a net worth of around $5 million if managed conservatively. For a more luxurious, rich life, the kind often associated with coastal cities, private schools, international vacations, and early retirement, the threshold rises to around $10 million or more. And for the upper tier, where wealth includes multiple properties, luxury vehicles, philanthropic influence, and the freedom to pursue projects without financial considerations, the threshold jumps to $25 million and beyond. These numbers, though startling, reflect the true economic landscapes of modern America, where inflation, housing shortages, and shifting social expectations reshape what prosperity requires. But if the journey of wealth were only about numbers, it would be far simpler. The deeper challenge lies in understanding how lifestyle, status, and psychological identity influence financial decisions. One of the most powerful forces driving American wealth behavior is something economists call the positional treadmill. The idea that as incomes rise, lifestyles expand to match them, and so the finish line moves forward, never feeling within reach. This treadmill is fed by culture, by media, by social circles, and by the architecture of American consumerism, which constantly offers new layers of luxury to chase. But the rich, truly rich, escape this trap, not by resisting lifestyle upgrades, but by prioritizing asset growth before lifestyle expansion. They structured their lives in a way where luxuries become the result of wealth, not the cause of its disappearance. Meanwhile, millions of Americans fall into the high-income trap, earning more but spending even faster, maintaining an image of wealth without building its foundation. And this is the nuance so often overlooked in the question of how much money is enough. Because the answer isn't just about numbers, it's about structure. A person earning $200,000 with zero debt and conservative spending can reach real wealth faster than someone earning $500,000 and drowning in obligations. Wealth is less about income and more about ratios. How much you keep, how much you invest, how much your money grows without you. And in America, where the financial system rewards asset ownership far more than labor, the path to becoming rich depends heavily on how quickly one transitions from income dependence to asset independence. But even with this knowledge, there remains an overlooked factor that shapes the cost of being rich: geography. For someone in Texas or Florida, where taxes are lower and housing is more affordable, being rich may begin at $200,000 to $250,000 in income. As we move deeper into the anatomy of American wealth, the illusion that being rich is solely a numbers game dissolves completely, replaced by a far more intricate reality. The climb into true wealth is a series of thresholds, each guarded not by bank accounts alone, but by decisions, habits, environments, and deeply ingrained mindsets that determine who rises and who remains trapped on the treadmill of financial survival. And this is where the separation between high earners, comfortable families, and the genuinely rich becomes unmistakable. Because when you examine the patterns of those who have crossed into the top 1%, or even the top 10%, you start noticing that their wealth is not an accident, is engineered through an understanding of systems, structures, and opportunities that most Americans never learn to access. This becomes especially clear when you consider the first major threshold, the one separating income-dependent households from asset-driven households. In the American middle class, even among six-figure earners, money flows outward almost as fast as it flows inward, consumed by expenses that feel unavoidable: housing, healthcare, taxes, transportation, childcare, debt repayment, till savings become a luxury, not a default. But for the wealthy, the flow of money reverses. Assets generate passive cash flow, investments multiply, and every year adds layers to their net worth. This is why the wealthy often say your first goal is to stop trading time for money. Because the moment income becomes decoupled from labor, wealth accelerates exponentially. This threshold is so significant that it becomes the dividing line between people who feel financially fragile and those who feel financially secure, even when their incomes are similar. Consider two households earning $300,000 a year. One spends nearly everything on maintaining a high lifestyle image: expensive schooling, 2 car payments, a large mortgage, constant travel, and social expectations, leaving little room for investment. The other, living in a more modest zip code with strategic spending and disciplined investing, grows its net worth far faster. The first household appears rich. The second actually becomes rich. And this contrast reveals something critical. The wealthy are not defined by lifestyle. They are defined by leverage. They use money to buy assets, and those assets buy freedom. But beyond leverage, the next major threshold, separating the rich from the almost rich, is the ability to withstand financial shocks. A middle-class family might collapse financially if a medical emergency, job loss, or recession hits. Even high-income earners can feel vulnerable if they carry significant debt or have minimal savings. Wealthy families, however, build multi-layer safety nets through diversified income, emergency funds, tax shelters, and risk management strategies. They are insulated not just by wealth, but by design. And yet, one of the most misunderstood thresholds of becoming rich lies in the difference between wealth accumulation and wealth protection. Many Americans focus solely on earning more, but the rich focus equally on minimizing losses through tax optimization, legal frameworks, strategic investments, and long-term planning. They understand that keeping money is just as important as making it. In fact, one of the most eye-opening realities is that the path to wealth is often shaped more by avoiding mistakes than by chasing massive wins. The wealthy rarely chase lottery-style returns. Instead, they pursue consistent, compounding growth through assets like index funds, real estate, equity stakes in private businesses, and tax-efficient investment structures. And because these systems allow wealth to grow silently in the background, the wealthy often appear calm, stable, and unaffected by economic fluctuations, while the rest of the country feels every economic tremor as a direct threat. But even beyond systems, structures, and strategies, the richest Americans enter another psychological universe, entirely one where their relationship with money, time, and risk becomes fundamentally different from the average person. In this universe, money becomes a tool, not a goal. Time becomes the true currency. And risk becomes something to be managed intelligently rather than feared. This is why wealthy individuals take calculated risks that others shy away from: starting businesses, investing in innovation, buying undervalued assets during downturns, because they understand that wealth multiplies fastest in moments of uncertainty. Meanwhile, most Americans are conditioned to avoid risk, seek stability, and follow predictable financial paths that lead to slow growth or stagnation. And this brings us to the next threshold: generational wealth. Most American families start each generation from zero, rebuilding financial foundations, repaying debts, and navigating the same struggles their parents faced. Wealthy families, however, start each generation ahead, passing down assets, knowledge, networks, and opportunities. This creates an upward spiral where wealth not only survives but expands. And the presence or absence of generational wealth dramatically alters how much money someone needs to feel rich. A person with a financial safety net requires less income to feel stable. A person without one requires far more just to avoid falling behind. This generational compounding explains why the cost of being rich appears far higher today than it did decades ago. A simple six-figure income once provided stability, but now, without assets backing it, even high earners can feel precarious. But perhaps the most revealing threshold of all lies in something few people consider: lifestyle expectations. What it means to live rich in America is shaped less by actual needs and more by perceived standards. Many people believe being rich means owning luxury cars, designer clothing, big homes, private school tuition, exclusive memberships, and constant travel. Most of these markers do not represent wealth at all. They represent consumption. The rich do not become rich by acting rich. They become rich by acting strategically. The appearance of wealth is often the greatest enemy of real wealth. And yet, American culture glamorizes visible luxury so intensely that millions of people overspend in attempts to signal success rather than build it, drifting further from financial freedom every year. But what the wealthy understands, what remains invisible to most, is that wealth is not built through outward expansion, but through inner accumulation. They prioritize buying assets before buying luxuries, financial freedom before lifestyle upgrades, long-term security before short-term image. And this mindset becomes the final and most decisive threshold, separating those who achieve wealth from those who only dream about it. Because to be rich in America is not just to earn a certain number or achieve a certain lifestyle, is to master the psychological and structural mechanics that turn money into power, into opportunity, into legacy. And now that these thresholds are clear, we can move into the final chapter where the story reaches its ultimate revelation. Not just how much money you need to be rich in America, but what happens to your life once you cross that line, and why the true cost of being rich may be far different from what anyone imagines. When you finally cross the invisible line into what America considers true wealth, the world around you does not change in a sudden burst of fireworks or celebration. Instead, life shifts quietly, subtly, like a lens adjusting its focus until everything looks different, not brighter or louder, but clearer, sharper. More controlled. In this transformation reveals the final truth about being rich in America. Wealth does not simply give you more money, it gives you a different relationship with reality itself. Suddenly, the anxiety that once lived in the background of every decision, the fear of unexpected bills, job loss, medical emergencies, rent increases, economic downturns begins to fade, replaced by a calm sense of insulation that most Americans will never feel. And this insulation affects everything. Your health improves because stress loosens its grip. Your relationships shift because choices are no longer filtered through financial pressure. Your time expands because you no longer sacrifice your hours for survival. Yet what surprises many people after achieving this level of wealth is that the external luxuries, the cars, the homes, the vacations, are not what define the experience. It's the internal shift, the psychological elevation that changes your life. The wealthy learn very quickly that money doesn't buy happiness, but it absolutely buys the conditions that allow happiness to flourish. Security, autonomy, time, and the freedom to pursue meaning without the weight of financial fear. And this realization leads to an even deeper discovery, one that many only understand after the fact. The true cost of being rich in America isn't measured in dollars, but in the discipline, clarity, and sacrifices required to maintain the very freedom wealth provides. Because once you cross into wealth, you also inherit a new responsibility protecting it. Suddenly, you understand why wealthy families obsess over estate planning, trusts, tax strategy, investment allocation, and risk management. Wealth, while powerful, is fragile without structure. One major mistake, legal, financial, or emotional, can unwind years of disciplined growth. And here lies another truth that most people overlook. The wealthy do not approach money emotionally. They approach it architecturally. They build wealth like engineers, maintain it like surgeons, and protect it like strategists. This is why the wealthy rarely chase trends, gamble with investments, or expand their lifestyles recklessly. They understand that wealth is not a moment, it is a system. And systems require maintenance. But even as the wealthy gain this intricate understanding of financial ecosystems, they also begin seeing the world through a new lens, one that exposes the profound inequalities embedded within the American landscape. When you are no longer consumed by financial fear, you begin recognizing just how many people are trapped by it each day. How many lives are shaped by constraints you no longer experience, and how many opportunities were only accessible to you because wealth opened doors. This awareness creates a paradoxical phenomenon. The wealthy often feel both empowered and humbled at the same time. Empowered by their freedom, humbled by the realization of how few truly attain it. And as they look across the country from neighborhoods where families struggle to survive to cities where wealth flows in rivers, they see the stark truth that American prosperity is not evenly distributed, nor is it easily achieved. Wealth is not simply earned. It is engineered through the right environment, the right education, the right habits, and often the right timing. And here lies the most profound revelation of this entire journey. The amount of money required to be considered rich in America is far less about the number itself and far more about the function that number serves in your life. For some, being rich begins at a net worth of $2 million, enough to remove financial stress and secure a comfortable future. For others, it begins at $5 million or $10 million assets that can generate substantial passive income. For the top-tier richness may begin at $25 million or more wealth capable of sustaining multiple lifetimes. But for everyone, regardless of number, richness is defined by one universal milestone: the moment your money works harder than you do. That is the moment you step off the treadmill. That is the moment you stop budgeting minutes of your life around financial obligations. That is the moment you feel the psychological shift from survival to sovereignty. And yet, this transformation is not a final destination, but a new beginning. Once the wealthy cross into true financial freedom, they begin asking different questions. Not how much do I have, but what do I want to build? Not what can I afford, but how do I want to shape my legacy? Not how do I stay afloat, but how do I create something that outlives me? This is why generational wealth becomes such a powerful focus among the rich. They understand that the real measure of wealth is continuity. Can your wealth survive you? Can it lift your family for generations? Can it create opportunities long after your lifetime? Can it outlast recessions, crises, political shifts, and personal challenges? And as they consider these questions, the wealthy begin constructing the frameworks that elevate a fortune into a legacy: trusts that protect assets, investments that compound for decades, philanthropic structures that create impact businesses that grow beyond their founders, and systems that ensure their children inherit not just money, but the literacy and discipline to sustain it. This is the ultimate stage of being rich in America. When wealth becomes something larger than personal comfort, it becomes a force, a tool, a foundation for impact. And yet, even at this level, the truth remains that wealth does not erase human complexity. The rich still feel fear, doubt, insecurity, failure. They still face personal challenges, emotional struggles, and the burden of choices. But what wealth provides is a buffer, a quiet, powerful barrier that protects them from the kinds of crises that uproot the lives of millions. And in this final revelation lies the answer that shaped your entire journey. Being rich in America is not about a single number. It is about reaching a point where money is no longer the controlling force in your life, but the enabling force. A point where time expands, pressure dissolves, and possibility opens. A point where you stop asking, how do I survive? And start asking, how do I live? And now, standing at the end of this exploration into wealth's structure, psychology, thresholds, and transformations, you begin to see the truth with absolute clarity. The real price of being rich in America is the pursuit of freedom. Not excess, not status, not luxury, but the quiet, unwavering freedom to live life on your terms. And once that becomes your destination, the number you need becomes not a mystery, but a target one you can now approach with understanding, precision, and purpose. And if this journey into the hidden architecture of American wealth opened your eyes, if it shifted even one layer of how you see money, freedom, and the quiet power behind financial independence, then stay with me, because what comes next goes even deeper. We're just beginning to reveal the systems the wealthy use to shape their lives. And the next chapter will take you inside the strategies, habits, and decisions that transform ordinary income into extraordinary freedom. If you thought this story was good, wait until you hear what's coming next. Hit subscribe so you never miss the next millionaire secret.